Okay, so if you take a look at the data file, what I've got here is national weather data or international weather data around hurricanes. How appropriate, hurricane season. I was telling one of my colleagues I was going to show this tonight, and he goes, "You sure you should show that with all the hurricanes going on?" Well, yeah, I'm going to. So, yeah, so you got hurricane data. It gives you several different pieces of data about the actual event, the latitude, the longitude, wind pressure, all of that's in here. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to load that data in. It's just one worksheet. All right. So we haven't really talked about it, but you know, as we move into maps, you know, those of you that have done this before, you know, just remember, obviously, Tableau, you know, can usually generate latitude and longitude for you with some of the other geospatial coordinates that exist. This particular data set, if you'll notice, it's already in there. Okay. So, and remember, it'll tell you. You'll see it in parentheses. It'll say generated if it's something that Tableau has generated automatically versus pulling from your native data, okay? Okay, so first off, I'm just going to give latitude and longitude each a double click, okay? It's going to render. It's rendering very slowly. While I'm waiting for that to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pop both of those to a dimension. Okay, so once you've got them on the row and column shelf, just change both of those to a dimension, and then you'll notice the map starts to take shape. So you're like, wow, that's incredibly worthless. Okay, so what we have here is it has taken every single data point in that map that covers many, many years worth of hurricane data. Okay. The only thing incredibly useful to me in this map is I now have a really good idea of where I probably don't want to live if I'm not a fan of hurricanes, okay? You can also tell that we're, you know, a little better insulated where we are up here, okay? All right, so next thing we got to do is we want to filter out a little bit, okay? So for this, I just want to look at hurricane data for 1 year, okay? Because, you know, if you're a big weather buff, you know that tropical storms, you know, a lot of times they'll develop in the ocean and they'll start to, you know, sweep their way in. You know, they're starting, you know, out here, and then they, you know, they get that rotation, and, you know, sometimes the storm dies out before it even hits landfall, and it's nothing, but they all get named, okay? And there's a big uproar because I don't know who decided this, if anyone's more up on weather than me. Hurricane names always have female names, and I don't understand how we got to that, why we named them all after women. But all right, so I'm going to take my dimension, that's ISO time, and I'm going to bring that over to my filters, okay? So if you look at this, the date, this is actually a date field, okay? It's encoded funny, okay? So Tableau didn't recognize it as a date, okay? So we've got two choices. We could try and do some data wrangling, and we could get this converted out and get it to a date. But actually, we're going to be able to work with it in its native form, all right? So if you look at this, you can kind of decipher, right? It gives you a year, and it gives you the month, and it gives you the day. So kind of a funky format, but then it also gives you the time, all right? And I find it interesting that we actually have hurricane data back to 1851, but whatever. All right, so what we want to do is we want to look at this data, but we only want to look at 1 year, all right? So I could go through the painstaking process of clicking every single one of these that says, you know, the given year I want and die a slow, painful death. What I prefer to do is I want to look at data for 2005. So I'm just going to click up at the top where it says search here, type in 2005, okay? Believe it or not, by default, Tableau is going to institute what I would call a wildcard search. So those of you that have written code, or most importantly written SQL, when I type in 2005, Tableau is actually treating it as if I did something like this, okay? So with a wildcard match, and I know some languages, that's the sequel that'll get you there. Some languages you put a question mark on the end to trigger a wildcard. Either way, Tableau is kind of doing that automatically, and we're fortunate here since year is the first 4 characters that we can do that, okay? So we can just put in 2005. Now, the display is a little wonky here. It looks like on the surface, Tableau has only found, about 8 of these. If you click into that space and scroll, you'll see that there are hundreds of them, okay? So what I do like about, this was an enhancement, I can't remember what version of Tableau this came out in, but this made things a lot easier. So it has returned a wildcard search on the year 2005. So I see them all there. And now, instead of having to still go through and click each individual one, the All button, if you just simply click All, it's only going to automatically check everything that qualified in your wildcard search, okay?
So if you actually go to wildcard, will it do the same thing if you were to type 2005?
Let's try it. Okay, contains, let's see. Yeah, I don't think we have a way to see in the output unless we run it, so. But that should work, yeah. Okay, they're all checked. Say okay. All right, so now I'm also going to take my ISO time field. And this is something we haven't used, at least in this class. Some of you have probably done this before. But at this point, you can see that now I've got all of these paths. Okay, so what this has done is this data, if you actually dug down into the data set, it would show you for each hurricane points in time of where that storm progressed. Okay, but now is what we're seeing is we are seeing every single storm. Okay, and if you follow hurricane traffic, is what they typically do is the first storm of the season begins with the letter A, and then it goes to B, and then it goes to C, okay? So the higher up you get in letters, the more storms you get, okay? So what we're seeing is we're seeing every storm from 2005 and its path, okay? Which isn't incredibly useful for us, okay? So I'm going to take this ISO time dimension, and I'm going to drag it up to pages. And then you can see when I do that, over here I get a control that pops up, just like when I add a filter control or I add a parameter control, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do is I've got a little box over here that I can click the down arrow that says Show History, okay? And marks to show history for, what I want to do is I want to show all. Is what I'm saying is I want you to show every single data point that you have for that given hurricane, okay? All right, leave that there. Be sure we're set up correctly there. And now I'm going to take the name of the hurricane and I'm going to bring it over here to my label. Okay, so like I said, first hurricane starts out with the letter A, so Hurricane Arlene, okay? And now all I need to do is I can come over here and I can click my play button and watch what happens. My map begins to progress through each one of those data points, and since I checked the box to say Show History, it will now show me the path that Hurricane Arlene is taking, okay? So once it completes, once Hurricane Arlene dies out, now you can see Hurricane Brett. So maybe they're not all female names. Maybe they change it. They do, they? Oh. Oh. That's right, yeah. So now you can see you got two going at the same time. Okay, so you get the utility of this, right? Anything that we have multiple data points plotted against, okay? Any type of GPS coordinates we could use. So clearly this is showing weather patterns. We could use this for airline traffic. We could use this for automobile traffic. Like I said, I had a student a couple classes ago that he worked for the railroad. They do a ton of this, okay? So being able to do essentially animated maps or maps in motion, okay? Now, what's the major drawback to this? If I export this and put it in PowerPoint, I'm a little limited, right? So this is one of those where I really do need to be able to demo it live from Tableau. You can push it up to Tableau Public. If you've got a Tableau server install, all of those things will work. But clearly, doing a screenshot of this isn't going to be incredibly effective, okay? But this is cool stuff. It's a lot of fun to kind of play with this and do different things with it, so. All right, how about we take a break, and we'll come back and we'll do some more mapping. heard if you have like gone through those two classes, you kind of have the Python structured out.
It's not nearly as
That's what I'm going to do.
yeah. I mean, already. I mean, ADM was not easy.
I've heard that. Oh. Yeah, we brought her in. Okay, guys. So I got two more map examples I want to do. This next one, I picked this one on purpose. I'll say it's not an overly advanced mapping example. It is a mapping example that uses Superstore, but the other impetus behind me showing this was I received 3 different emails this week from you guys asking or presenting me with a problem with your homework, and they all, of these 3, they all needed to be solved with use of a case statement. Okay, some of you are having trouble with the syntax of your if statements. Okay, so this example I'm going to show you will actually leverage a case statement. So we haven't done that yet. So those of you that are kind of in the programming world or have been, kind of the rule is, if you've got an if statement and you go past a couple conditions, if then else if, once you get to kind of that second one, you kind of need to start thinking about breaking it out into a case statement. If you're listening to what I'm saying and you're going, it sounds like he's speaking Mandarin, that's okay too. I'm going to show you an example, okay? But just like with any type of scripting or programming standards, the goal is, right, and those of you that have written code, you have been here. Especially those of you in big organizations, the likelihood of you getting somebody else's code dropped in your lap to either fix or append or enhance, is incredibly high. And if you're really lucky, the person that wrote that colossal pile of crap is no longer with the organization. Okay, and you guys are laughing because those of you that are laughing, you've been there, right? And then it's also, using those good standards, there's benefit to that as well, because I've had it happen to me too. I can't tell you how long it's been since I actually wrote code that was in Cerner's pipeline. It would have been 2004, probably would have been the last script I ever committed. And it was a year ago, so this would have been 12, 13 years after I'd written any code for Cerner that got put in their main code pipeline. I was at an advisory board meeting, and there was a Cerner architect there, and we're doing introductions, and on break, he comes up to me, and he goes, "Did you used to work at Cerner?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I was cussing your name a week ago." And I was like, "Oh, yeah?" And he goes, "I got a hold of one of your scripts." And I was like, "Oh, yeah?" So I said, "Which one was it?" So he told me the name of the script, and I go, that was not my finest hour. And he goes, it was not. Do you? Yeah. Does it work? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. We'll kind of go through some of that as well. So let's hook to Superstore. I'm going to work with the orders table again tonight. All right, and again, we haven't worked with any of those geospatial coordinates really in the Superstore set yet, but here's an example of, again, what I was talking about. The Superstore data set does not have lat-long coordinates in it, but it does have city, state, and this one even has postal code. And I don't think this one has country. It does not, but it does have kind of a global flair in that it has market on there. And if you remember that market data, let me just drop it out here. They classify by market, Africa, Asia Pac, that sort of thing. But again, that's not really, Tableau is not picking that up as a geospatial measure, okay? All right, so I'm just gonna come up here to state, and I'm gonna double click on state. Okay, so it's just gonna drop a point on each one of my states. Is what this is doing is this is going out to the data set and it's grabbing, there's at least one row for every state, because it looks like every landmark here has something on there. I'm not seeing Alaska and Hawaii, so chances are that means there's nothing there, okay? So next, instead of a dot map or a symbol map, I'm going to change this to a fill type map, okay? So come down here, drop this to type map, okay? And this is just gonna, instead of putting a dot on the map, it's gonna fill the whole area. Funny story, I'm teaching an undergrad visualization class right now, and I had a student turn this in for homework. And I gave him a 0. And he showed up in my office. And he said, why did I get a 0? I turned it in. I said, you made 2 clicks. And he goes, but it's a map. And I said, what does it tell me? And he goes, and it was actually with the Superstore data, because we've been working, I had to work them up to Superstore. And I said, well, what is it telling me? And he goes, well, it's a blue map, and every state that sold something is blue. I said, okay, as a business leader, what kind of decision are you going to make with this? He goes, well, I don't really know. And I said, okay, let me change my question. I said, you're the boss. What are you going to pay the business analyst that you just paid to create this chart? And he goes, well, hopefully a lot of money. And I said, probably not. And then we had a 20-minute discussion on why analytics and data science is probably not the major for him. All right, so what is the business question I want to answer behind this map? See, if you ever feel dumb, remember that story, okay? Somebody not only turned that in, but they thought it was good work, okay? I mean, they were really pleased with themselves there. So anyway, yeah. So what's the business question we're wanting to answer here? So we want to take a look at our products, okay? And we want to see which states adopted the products quickest, okay? So who were our first adopters? So thinking about our market penetration, right? So I saw a viz for something very similar to this. I actually tried to find it. I don't know where I filed it away. This was more of my leisurely visualization scrolling, but looking at the expansion of breweries, right? So if you look like right here in our hometown, right, you know, probably the most popular, well-known brewery is Boulevard Brewing, right? You know, so if you followed the story, they started off with a 5-gallon keg of beer at Ponak's, okay? And they rapidly expanded. And I remember even as recent as 5 years ago, my friend that lives in Arizona, every time I would go to visit, I had to bring a suitcase full of Boulevard beer because he couldn't get it there. Now he can get it in Arizona. So if you look at that kind of expansion, we can see how our products expand out nationwide. So that's essentially what we want to look at here. Is we want to see which states were the first to sell the product compared to which states were the last to sell the product. So we're going to do that with a filled map, and we're going to color code across the color gradient, okay? Darker the color, will indicate we were a late adopter, the lighter the color, an early adopter. Of course, you could flip that and do it however you want. Okay. So the first thing we have to do is we have to use a calculated field to actually kind of do rank percentiling here. So I'm going to pop a new calculated field, okay, and I'm going to name this state, order, date, percentile. Now, if you had me for the first class, you know that, and many of you have done this out in the real world too, you know, if we just want to do a normal rank on something, we'll just type index, open quote, or open paren, close paren, and away we go. Okay, we convert it to discrete, and we're done. Okay, one that kind of takes us to the next level is what's called the rank percentile calculation. Okay, or function, excuse me. Returns the percentile rank for the current row in the partition. Okay, you can use an optional ascending or descending argument. Okay, so with this function, the set of values 6, 9, 9, 14 would be ranked 25, 75, 75, 100. Okay, so just showing us where they are in the rank. Okay, and we'll put this to use, and that'll probably make a little more sense, I'm guessing. Okay, all right. So I'll do rank percentile, and now since I want to know the first state to adopt, I'm going to hit a nested min function. Okay, so I'm going to hit nested minimum. Okay, and then I'm going to key all this off of my order date. Okay. I got a good calculation. I'm going to take that newly created calculated field, and I'm going to drop it onto the color shelf. And now you're looking at this going, well, that didn't do a damn thing. Okay. One more thing we have to do, this is what people oftentimes forget. I need to click the down arrow on that color field that I just dropped, and I need to come down and tell it that I want it to compute at the state level. Okay, it didn't know that yet. Okay, so now you're like, okay, so what? I've added a little bit of color here. I can turn on my labels here. And as what this has done is it's gone through and it's taken, you can see up here in my color label, it's taken the aggregate, okay, of my newly calculated field, my state, order, date, minimum, all right? And again, it's how this reads is the largest number, okay, is the last one to adopt, okay? So I've kind of got it twofold here with pulling in the label in addition to coloring. If I mouse over here, I'm looking for my number that is 1 or closest to 1, okay? So as you can see, West Virginia is at 0.9588. I've got Vermont at 0.85, so it's looking like that West Virginia is my front runner here with, here you can see I've got North Dakota and Wyoming pretty darn close. Okay, so now I want to give a little bit more definition here and control. So I'm going to take category and I'm going to drop it to my filter. So my three main categories, furniture, office supplies, and technology. And I'm going to plop that filter control over to the right. So I'll manipulate that a little bit later. All right, so thinking through this, this in its native form probably isn't incredibly useful. You saw how long I kind of had to fumble around and go, okay, well, West Virginia here, and then what was my lowest one? Well, here I've got a 0.03, here's a 0.07, another 0.03. That's incredibly draining, okay? So let's think about adding a little versatility here. So one thing I was talking about today is, and again, they looked at me like I had two heads. I said, you know, you're going to create a viz, you're going to go into the boss's office and present it. And they're going to say, no, go change that. And then you change that, and then they're going to say, I don't like that. So with every viz you create, think about what type of filter controls, what kind of type of parameters, what type of empowerment can I give the user, the obnoxious boss, okay, or in my case, the obnoxious client, to self-serve, right? So maybe one thing I might want to do is I could come through and I could put these into buckets, right? So maybe I could say, show me in quarters, right? Which was the first 25% to adopt, the first 50%, the first 75%, and then the last remaining 25%, okay? And Tableau even updated this functionality not too long ago. It used to be you could just, if you remember, if you ever built a box and whisker plot, by default, used to be Tableau would only break it into quartiles, right? So if you remember with a box and whisker plot, you've got this guy going on here, okay? What does this thing indicate, this bar here? My maximum number, okay? How about this? This is my upper quartile, okay? So this is 75%, okay? And then usually I have a line through here, which is what? That's my mean, okay? What do I have here? This is my lower quartile, okay? And then what's this? That's my minimum. By default, can I have numbers above and below the max and the min? Good box and whisker design typically says no, okay? What is Tableau's default? Anyone remember? I get this question about once a year from my clients that I've given Tableau to and trained them. I'm making a box and whisker plot, and suddenly I'm seeing dots above or below, okay? What have I done wrong? And the answer is you've done nothing wrong, okay? Tableau's default is if you are 1.5 times the interquartile range, if you have a data point that is 1.5 times above this interquartile or below the interquartile, so it doesn't skew your top and bottom bars, we'll take it out, okay? So several releases ago in Tableau, when you made a box and whisker plot, you could only do quartiles, okay? So now you can do more than that, okay? We're not making a box and whisker, but we're going to employ really kind of the same type of breakdown, okay? So again, I want to think about how do I empower my user to look at it from every angle possible without making me create a new graph, okay? So let's think of it from this way. I'm going to say you can do it in halves. You can do it in quarters. You can do it, no, hang on, let's see. So I also want to do maybe thirds, okay? So we call that, sheesh, not my night, tertiles. Do it in tertiles. I'm going to do it in quartiles. And last, I'm going to do it in quintiles. All right? So I throw all 4 of these at my user. I give them the control to switch back and forth. They can see it at the touch of a button. Okay? So how are we going to do it? All right. I'm going to uncheck my show mark labels because with what we're about to do, hopefully this is going to eliminate the need for having to put those nasty labels on there. All right, so let's create a parameter. And I'm going to name my parameter order of adoption buckets. It's going to be a string. And we want to feed this from a list. And I'm going to do one for halves. I'm going to do one for tertiles. I'm going to do one for quartiles. And I'm going to do one for quintiles. Okay. Again, doesn't matter what you do, how you spell this out, if you abbreviate this, just be consistent, okay? Be consistent with all 4 of those, okay? And remember it, okay? Because we've done enough parameters by now that what's coming next? What do we have to do next to power this parameter control? Calculated field, okay? So we're going to go into a calculated field and we're going to call out all 4 of these, okay? If we're not 100% consistent because we're passing string variables back and forth here, okay? We're not consistent, it ain't going to work. All right, so kind of take a mental note of what you got going on there. So I'm going to save my parameter, and I'm going to say show parameter control, so it's going to pop up over here. And since I've only got 4 options here, this is just a design thing, just kind of my preference. You're not wrong if you do it the other way, but when I only have 4 options, I like to not go with the drop-down menu. If I've got the real estate, I typically like the single value list, just because I can see them, they're there, life is so much easier, okay? All right. So next up, let's crank out a calculated field that's going to do all this, okay? So if you're kind of thinking through logically here what I've got to do, I need to go through, okay? I need to pull my parameter control, okay? I'm going to reference my parameter control in my calculation, okay? And then based off of what my calculation, my other calculation is returning, okay? I need to assign a value, essentially a bucket, all right? So for halves, it's either going to be the first half or the second half. For tertiles, first third, second third, last third. Quartiles, you get the idea, okay? So, I'm going to name this order of adoption buckets. So, first time for us doing this, at least in this class, I'm going to create a case statement, okay? And I'm going to reference my order of adoption buckets, my parameter, right? And so in Tableau, my syntax for a case statement is, I first signify I'm going to give it a case statement, and then I use the when operator, okay? So I'm going to say when halves, and I used an uppercase H on mine. So when halves, then, okay, so it's going to be a little weird. I'm going to do a case statement, and then within the case statement, I'm going to do, in each case, I'm going to do an if statement. All right, so this will make a little sense when we get it all hammered out here. All right, so I'm going to, I don't have to, but I like to indent just so I can kind of follow along. It's a lot easier to dissect this when I get into trouble. So, all right, so state order date percentile. Okay, so that was that calculated field we created at the beginning that's using that rank percentile, okay? So I'm going to say state order percentile. Now remember, I'm returning, you saw, I put the label up there. What type of number does it return? It's a decimal, right? So closest to 1, it's obviously 100%, okay? Anything beyond that, okay? So I'm going to do state order percentile, okay? So I'm going to say if it is less than or equal to 0.5, okay? I want to assign it the value of 1, okay? So this is just for halves, right? It's only going to be in 1 of 2 buckets, okay? So here, logic tells me that if it's not less than or equal to 5, then it's in the upper half, okay? So then all I need to do is just assign a value of 2, right? Now, get used to it saying the calculation contains errors because it's not going to be until we get to the very end that it closes it out. Yeah?
Is the reason your state order date percentile not orange because E is capitalized?
There's a space after percentile. You took out the space. And
Oh, I had a space when I made it, didn't I? Thank you. Ugh. Ah, thank you. Okay. So next thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to end out of that case statement, excuse me, that if statement, and then Now, I'm going to hit my next one, tertiles. Okay. Another if statement. Okay, so this time I'm going for thirds, right? So my math is going to be a little bit different. So my first one is going to be less than or equal to 0.33. Okay, we don't have to be overly precise. We could get into a mathematical argument of how far out do we carry the 3. Okay, we're just going to say 0.33. Okay. All right. Okay, next up, I'm going to hit this with an else if condition. And it's going to be state order percentile. So this one is going to be less than or equal to, and I'm going to do 0.67 just to eliminate any rounding issues here. And then, of course, my last else will just catch that last third to a value of 3. And then, of course, an end. Good grief. Yes, thank you. Then I blame this on these meetings that have sucked the life out of me today. All right, so next we'll do quartiles. So of course, when I'm working with a quartile range, then I'm going to be 0.25. I'm going to do a 0.5. .75, and then my else condition, a 4, end. And last quintiles. And you can always cheat, and since you're essentially typing this very similar stuff, you can just grab a copy paste. All right, and don't forget, obviously you've got a pretty lengthy calculation here. You've got a case statement that's got 4 different potential paths with if statements nested inside of that. Keep in mind you need to end each if statement, and then you also need to, at the very bottom, end the case statement. All right. This is where I do prefer some other languages. Like I remember in my VB days, you would end an if statement with end if, and you would end a case statement with end case. So it was a little easier to kind of marry up what went where. So, anybody having issues? Yep, that's it. Change the name. Yeah. Okay. Everybody got it? All right, I'll post this example too, so if you want to reference back to it. All right, so I'm going to say OK. And now I want to convert this, take it to a discrete. Okay, and the last thing I'll do is I'll take the field and I'm going to drop it to color. Okay, and now watch what happened. So what I really like about this is it creates a pretty dynamic chart for us. So when I have it to halves, of course, only 2 colors pop up, and I can then, of course, click through. And if my statements are working correctly, it's just going to add color to it, right? As I add, that extra, go from halves to tertiles to quartiles to quintiles. Okay. The other thing I like about this that a lot of people don't know that you can do when you've got a chart set up like this is, and this is really helpful with maps, guys, is let's say I'm on quartiles and I want to see only my second, my 25 to 50%. You can come over here to your color palette and just simply click on it, okay? And it'll kind of gray out everything that isn't in that range, okay? Okay. Now is what some people will do, and I'm not a fan of this, but it's worthwhile to show, is we're treating this as a discrete measure, right? If you change it to a continuous, it will still work, okay, right? You see I can click through it. I don't like this. Some people prefer to go with a continuous measure here. The reason I don't like it is, one, I lose that flexibility of being able to just simply click a solid color. Whereas here, if I go to continuous, it is giving me from a color scheme, right, different shades of blue. So it's a lot more challenging. And there's 2 schools of thought here, guys. And if you're in this school, I'm not saying you're wrong. Just understand the differences, right? The other thing that some people will do, if they go this route, if they want to go continuous field, is they'll say, oh, well, you step the color, okay? Again, this your way, that's fine. I'm not a fan just because, I'm on quintiles and I can step the color to 5 right now, but then if I change it down to halves, my color still holds at the steps of 5. So now it's putting them on extremes, right, where this is my 1 and this is my 2, but all this in here kind of leads to confusion. So again, that's why I just kind of prefer with this to use it as discrete, because it's a very clear-cut color difference, all right? Okay. Trying to decide if I have time to get through this example, because I want to give you guys plenty of time for homework. So I might actually pause now, because this last example is really big, so it's going to take a while. So let's do that. Let's stop and go to homework. And I will pick this next example up next week. Like I said, it's going to take me a while, because we're going to blend together 2 different data sources. We're going to pull in some airport data. We're going to chart flight delays. So it actually does a lot of data blending on the front end with maps that we haven't done yet. So I'm going to pause on that, give you guys a chance to collaborate on homework. I'm not stacking on another homework this week because I want to show you some more stuff with maps. So I'll pause there. You guys can work on homework. I know I need to walk around and address some questions with some of you as well. I want to be sure we have time for that. So stop there.